Bring the meeting to order. I'm going to do a roll call at this time. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Here. Councilman Rivenbark is here. Councilmember Spears, are you here?
I am here.
Okay. Councilmember Waddell? Here. Councilmember Andrews?
Here.
Councilmember Joyner? Here. And the chair is here. Everybody's here and accounted for. We have facility tomorrow night. Consent agenda C1 is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution awarding a citywide tree removal contract to Lanier Tree Services LLC for the removal of 27 trees in the amount of $108,025. Yes, sir, Mr. Rivenbark.
I don't know who here I talked to, but in the verbiage, it was talking about trees that are dying or whatever. Who makes that call on what we're
Sally
here to see
Thigpen,
Sally?
who
Okay.
will answer those questions for us.
Good morning, thank you. Yes, these trees are evaluated by our ISA certified arborists on staff.
Who is that?
So that'll be Aaron Reese, Ben Misla is our new assistant city arborist, and we have a couple of others who are certified.
Okay. The reason I ask that is in the years I've been up here, it never fails. We'll have people call and they've got a tree that's not on their property or a tree that maybe is on their property. And they've had tree people come out and say, this tree's dying, it needs to go. And then our people go out there and say, no, we can't do it. There's a real, I won't call it a conflict, but it's like we're speaking out of both sides of our mouth. We go out and make a call and say, this tree's down, we're going to take it down. But we go and see some of these places. And I've gone, I mean, I'm not getting it just secondhand. I've gone and looked, and the top of the tree is dead. It's got a lot of dead limbs on it, and yet we don't let them take it down. And it's in a storm, they're worried about it falling on their outbuildings or their house. So I'd like to just get that become a little more in line so that we can be not so definite in our answers when we go out to these people, because I follow up on it, and it just kind of goes against my grain to have us do this and then to go out and say, no, you can't cut it down. That's all I wanted to say.
Well,
Go ahead, Mr. Waddell.
while we're talking about it real quick, it just brought something to my attention. A while back, I had sent it up the chain for a stop by a gentleman who lives in Inland Greens, and there's a tree very close to one of the properties on Inland Greens that I think is on city property, but it's the root structure is going into the sidewalk there and breaking up the sidewalk. And the gentleman who brought it to my attention said there's just a lot of elderly neighbors. I wonder if we might just have somebody go take a look at that tree, and I can follow up with an email, but while it was in my head.
Not a problem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. C3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a lease agreement with Tova Wealth Management LLC for a portion of the 7th floor of 929 North Front Street. C4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a lease amendment with Protolease USA Incorporated for a portion of the 4th floor at 929 North Front Street. Public hearings, PH1 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 804 Russell Alley as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. PH2 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish the dwelling at 905 Worcester Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the Wilmington City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. PH3 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish a dwelling at 909 Worcester Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the Wilmington City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. Ordinances. 01 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation to the Public Improvement Fund for a Justice Assistant Grant in the amount of $62,545 for the Wilmington Police Department boat lift replacement and a portable camera system for New Hanover County. And then reports, we'll have RP1, which is reports of council's appointments committee for boards, commissions, and committees. And this concludes this agenda, which is a very short one. Mr. Manager?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of council, we have two items for you this morning. The first is an update on the Sister City Commission from Marilyn Cantarella, who is the chair. So Marilyn, come forward.
Marilyn, could you come closer to the microphone so everybody can hear you and see you?
How's that?
Yes, ma'am.
Better?
Yes.
Okay. So as most of you know, I traveled to Barbados in December for the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the twinning between Wilmington and Bridgetown, and I was accompanied by Jennifer Villa Fernandez, who's the Assistant Director of International Programs at UNCW. You probably have some recall that the relationship between the two cities has been the weakest link of all our partnerships, largely because we're a city government and we're trying to respond to a national government and vice versa. So it's a little bit more challenging. So I reached out to the Minister of Foreign Affairs early last year, got no response. I spoke by phone to the consulate in Miami, and it was a good conversation. Eventually, we got a letter of invitation from Dr. Green, who's the Director of Cultural Policy and Research in Barbados. She reports directly to the Prime Minister. She's also the Secretary General for the National Commission for UNESCO. So she hosted us for a meeting and also arranged for an introduction for me, Jennifer was gone, with Colin Jordan, who is, he's a minister representing Speightstown, but he's on the committee which has been focusing on the relationship between Barbados and the Carolinas for quite some time, although not focused on Wilmington, but Charleston. And Colin Jordan then referred me to Corey Lane, who is the minister for Bridgetown specifically. So I met with both of them, and Corey Lane, we've been having virtual meetings since my return to Wilmington. And the basic interest in any cooperation is in culture, heritage. A sports exchange was discussed, specifically soccer. And so we were in the process of arranging a soccer exchange with Doncaster, so I decided to make it more international and all sister cities would be invited. And I broached this subject with Doncaster, and they're okay with that. So the good news is the government in Barbados would pay for travel and housing and all of that for these young people. In the other cities, it's going to be a little more challenging, but we'll work on that. And then, lo and behold, I got both a phone call and an email from Dr. Green asking me to send her a formal invitation. I copied the mayor to invite her to the Azalea Festival this year, like in a few weeks. So I reached out to the director of the Azalea Festival to see if we could arrange for her to be a VIP guest. And so now we're waiting on confirmation, and Minister Lane from Bridgetown, when he learned of the plan, said, well, I'd like to come. And I said, well, you're most welcome. So then you would have an opportunity to actually meet with a member of parliament who lives in Bridgetown. So that would be, I think, a plus. I think the challenge will continue to be that national-local relationship. So I'm not sure that it will improve significantly, but we're trying to make an effort, and we're doing a panel, the association in spring, protecting coastal habitats, and I have a presenter from UWI from Barbados who will be on the panel. So I think it's just baby steps, and they did send someone here for the 10th anniversary, and you know, that was challenging, but it went very well. Some of you may remember it, certainly Councilman Rivenbark and Bill Saffold were there. So I think it's encouraging, but their interest for several years now has been on the relationship with Charleston. And because many of their ancestors arrived in the United States in the harbor there. They were slaves and they were sold. So I think if they come, I can arrange for the Bunce Island exhibit to be on display in Wilmington, which is the story of the slaves from West Africa who arrived in Barbados and then came here. So that would be something Dr. Green would be, I think, extremely pleased about. But I can't do anything until they tell us. So that's the other thing about this country is, you know, it's like 48 hours notice, which is challenging. But we'll do what we can and hope for the best. So the other thing, in terms of Doncaster, Dylan's going to play you a trailer of the first project we finished with them, and you can see the full film online. But what was exciting is I spoke with them, and they are going to submit that film to a film festival in Doncaster. If it's accepted, it'll be screened in June. So I told the film lab at the community college, and they were just so delighted because there were students who worked on it. One was deaf because we wanted it to be ADA compatible, and another student who was a tutor actually who has a disability. So even if nothing comes of it, it's just something that they can put on their resume and say, we did it. So I'm glad for that.
Thank you.
You know, so Dylan, you want
In 1834, the Wilmington and Raleigh Railroad was chartered. One of its principal investors was a champion of the new technology named Edward Bishop Dudley. He would become the railroad's first president and would later be elected governor of North Carolina in 1836, the first to be elected by popular vote. Governor Dudley used his power and influence to champion the rail across the state. When North Carolina's capital, Raleigh, showed little interest in the rail project, the terminus was relocated to Weldon, North Carolina. When the Wilmington and Weldon was completed in 1840, its 161 miles was the longest continuous rail line in the world and connected Wilmington to the cities of the north. By 1847, investors felt it necessary to build a southbound line, and on the eve of the Civil War, the Wilmington and Manchester Railroad linked Wilmington to lines that ran throughout the South. The W&M had its terminus on Eagles Island, on the other side of the river, and passengers would ferry across to continue to the north and south. The combination of Wilmington's more accessible port with a well-connected rail line proved a powerful combination. In the 20 years preceding the Civil War, its economy boomed, its population doubled, and it became the largest exporter of naval stores in the world.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. Thank you very much for that report. And okay, thank you very much. Always. Thank you. Mr. Manager, anything further?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Chad McEwen is going to do a presentation on the creation of the Northern Riverfront Development Committee and District. This is in association with the private covenants that we inherited when we purchased the property on the north end of downtown.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. Thank you for the opportunity this morning to go over the creation of this district and the committee, associated committee. You have copies of my presentation, the memo, the declarations, and a map that outlined the district that's proposed in front of you. So, quick background on, Mr. Caudill mentioned the declaration related to the northern area of the city. There's 3 primary declarations that have led us to this point and kind of govern this framework that we're going to create or propose to be created. You'll see the acronym DECCR throughout this presentation. Essentially, that's a acronym for the Declaration of Easements, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The first of which was drafted and recorded on January 7th, 2005, between Almont Shipping and River Ventures, LLC. As a reminder, River Ventures is the entity that we purchased the Skyline Center from, which was former PPD and Thermo Fisher property. When we purchased that property, there was an assignment and assumption of rights under that declaration that was recorded at the same time that deed was recorded in July 13, 2023. Separate to this process, but still important to know and understand, is a declaration that was recorded in September of 2005 related to the Convention Center track, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later on about that and how that's pertinent to this discussion. In terms of why we're doing this, we have a legal obligation through that assumption that we signed as part of that purchase to adhere to the rights and obligations of that declaration that was originally recorded in 2005. Also, doing so will help us ensure congruence and continuity of development, particularly the undeveloped portions of the property, and I'll itemize those undeveloped tracts here in a little bit. It also enables the committee that's going to be created to promote the highest and best use and prioritize public purposes related to the development of those properties. It's, in simplistic terms, it's best to understand how this will function in terms of an HOA ARB board. If you purchase a property that's in a homeowners association, a lot of those obviously will have an association, but they also may have a subcommittee, an architectural review board. This committee would serve in a large capacity, in that capacity as an ARB for the properties associated with it. In a nutshell, the city's rights and obligations through that assignment from River Ventures is listed here. Very high-level detail related to what that committee would do. River Ventures down there at the bottom, just keep in mind anytime you would see the word River Ventures through that assignment and assumption, the City of Wilmington is substituted into that title. So any rights and obligations that were given to River Ventures through those declarations are now assumed by the City of Wilmington.
Well, they sure had a lot of power over us.
The mechanics of creating this district, kind of what's led us to this point, obviously the assignment and assumption, which was recorded in 2003 or 2023 when we purchased the property, guides this process from this point forward. The presentation of our proposed plan, which is obviously going on right now. Then we'll bring back, if council is so obliged, we'll bring back a resolution to create the district and committee to fulfill the rights and obligations of the assignee. We estimate that would occur in April of this year. Membership of the committee would include all elected members of the City Council and the mayor. 2 non-city district property owners would have seats on that committee. The city manager or a designee would be ex officio, as well as the city attorney, and the planning director also would or their designee would be ex officio. One other member that we would seek to have on that committee as ex officio would be a local architect to help guide and advise the committee regarding specifics.
Chad, can you expound a little bit on non-city district property owners? What is that?
So that would be, in explicit terms, it would be, for example, Pier 33 ownership.
So property owners that are not affiliated with the City of Wilmington?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Not property that the city is the owner of, either through Skyline or undeveloped properties, the park.
Right.
As well.
Appointed by the City Council, those members?
Correct. It would be those 2 members, as well as the local architect, would go through the typical appointments process, applications and appointments committee.
Okay, thank you.
The footprint of the proposed district is itemized here. Dylan, if you'll pull that map up, please, sir. Zoom in a little bit if you can, Dylan. There's several things going on here with the map. First, call out the convention center property, which is hashed out in black down there at the bottom. That is not part of this proposal. There are separate covenants related to that property that we felt like, after speaking with legal, we did not feel it needed to be intertwined. Also, not part of this proposal and not part of the River Ventures declaration is the parking deck, the existing parking deck that was purchased with Skyline. We would not propose including that within the footprint of this district or committee's purview. All of the Altamont shipping properties, including the developed and undeveloped portions, the River Ventures property, which is the Skyline building, as well as the 3.5-acre southern lot. There is one tract of land, which is in the center of your map. It's titled Altamont and RV. That single piece of property is subject to both of the declarations and covenants. Also, to kind of bring this full circle, have it more of an all-inclusive committee to help with the redevelopment of that area, we would propose that you bring in the city's properties that the city currently owns, either through the purchase of Skyline or other acquisitions, prior acquisitions with Salvation Army, or the Gateway properties. So what the River Ventures purchase did not include the Skyline North property that overlooks the amphitheater. So we would propose including all of those within the committee footprint and purview of the committee. All right, Dylan, if you'll go back to the presentation. Here's itemized acreages related to those properties I just went over. In total, it's about 47 acres total, about 13 and a half of which are undeveloped right now. Next steps, consideration of the resolution to create the district, which we anticipate would be April of this year. Solicitation of committee members, again, two non-city property owners as well as an architect, would start sometime thereafter, assuming May or June of this year. And the formation meeting for the committee would be anticipated around July 2025. And I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Sir.
Can you explain the purpose of adding non-council members as voting members?
Non-council members as voting members.
The two property owners?
The two property owners, because the declarations included those properties already, so they already have obligations underneath those declarations. For example, well, Dylan, if you'll pull that map. Those properties, although they're developed, they are still subject to that declaration. So, for example, Pier 33, and Madam City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, Pier 33, Metropolitan, if they decided to, for example, change the color of their building, paint it, they would have to come back to this committee. Right now, it's a city committee because we assumed that assignment. But this more formalizes the process and creates an actual committee. Because they're subject to it, we felt it appropriate to make them members of that committee.
Say that very last part again.
Because they're subject to those declarations and the obligations, we felt it appropriate for them to be eligible to be part of that committee.
And who is we? Who's the team that worked on this?
I worked with the city council, or with the city attorney's office on creating this framework.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Chad, real quick, go back to the map real quick. Yeah. So the Almont, where it says RV right there, I guess there's a site there that I believe was sold.
Correct.
For a hotel development. We would have a say in what that hotel would look like after this committee's structure is appointed?
Yes, sir. Under that, I'm sorry, Dylan, keep flipping back. If you go back to that second slide, Dylan, those rights and obligations under the assignment. Right here. That this committee would have all these responsibilities and authorities underneath any development related to that footprint.
Are they individuals that have purchased those properties are aware of this?
It should come out in, that they're subject to the declaration and the assignment through their title work and purchasing the property.
Okay, because I understand that there has been some discussion about a hotel on one of the sites, maybe both sites. I think there was the Pier 33 site. There was the vacant lot there that butts the marina, and then the other one on the other side of the street. I believe Mr. Schoniger owned, but has since sold it to I believe, a hotel developer. And I believe that those, I understood or have heard that some of that discussion has been ongoing with the planning department in respect to the hotel development.
Yes, sir. Either I've been involved in direct conversations or know that they've been passed on indirectly through me or Mr. Parsley to those proposed buyers.
And so then we would then, after this committee is set up, we would have a review of the plans, or at least the exterior, because I know one of the things, not only of the restrictive covenants that were put on the property, but also the ones that the city purchased for the gateways to assure the community that we had a say in what it would look like. We
Right.
would have a say in that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Mr. Umbar?
We're only talking about appearance. And the ordinance overrides size, building height. We're talking about the facade appearance.
I think once we create it, and I'll defer to Madam City Attorney, the declaration is very broad. You can read that language, it's very broad. I think once there's a formation meeting, if there are more specific guidelines and parameters you want to operate under, the committee would like to operate under, we can certainly draft those and have that as the governing document. But it's very broad the way it's set up now, the declaration. I think that was about
I just don't want to present a moving target. It needs to be very specific when these folks come in to do business, that it's not up to the whims of someone, well, we don't like that, let's do this. It needs to be a set policy. And the other question I had, how does this, I mean, during an appraisal process, how does this affect value?
That's a good question, something we can research and get back to you on. You know, these type frameworks exist all the time with HOAs, and I don't know that, at least anecdotally, I've had an experience where subject to HOA bylaws or guidelines dramatically affects an appraised value, and I think there's actually been arguments the other way around, that being subject to ARB and HOA guidelines could increase the value and stabilize property values. We can find out more.
I guess what I'm getting at, I travel and go to cities where everything doesn't look cookie cutter.
Correct.
I mean, that's what I don't want to see, or I would not be in favor of that at all. I like for there to be some, some variety in the appearance and building shapes. The mayor and I were in Toronto, and they just told those architects just to go wild, and it's eye opener. It's very pretty. Some of the architectural buildings we saw there. Thank you.
Sure.
I think I heard you say that these people that come in, they will get this information directly or indirectly. Help me understand what you mean by indirectly. I'm going to make sure that they get it.
When I say indirectly, I'm referencing conversation that I've not been part of, but I know occurred, and I'm pretty certain that there was a conversation that was had, the property the mayor mentioned earlier that's subject to River Ventures and Altamont, to advise them, the proposed buyer of that property, that they would be subject to these declarations. The one closer to the river, I was involved in that conversation. We have advised that proposed buyer that they would be subject to these declarations.
Okay, so it won't be a surprise to anybody.
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, they do receive, when a title search is done, when they purchase any of these properties, these declarations are attached to the properties themselves. So they are aware and receive these declarations when they do the title search, when they're all aware that these are in place when they buy the property. And
Awesome.
Councilman Rodenbart, just to address the question you previously asked, this is not actually just facade. This does include building elevations and a whole host of things that are also covered by city code. And so that's one of the issues, is that it is a little bit of a moving target. And that's why we've been struggling with it and trying to deal with it and figure out how this is going to work, because we obviously do have city code and planning rules and such, but this does go above and beyond that and does include elevations. If I recall correctly, I believe that Pier 33 was required to take down the height of their facility by PPD because it was going to interfere with their view of the river. So those things are going to be able to be taken into consideration, and that's another reason that we decided to include other property owners in this committee as well to address Councilman Joyner's concerns, because we didn't want this to just be the city overruling the city and coming up with something different. If there's something that the property owners in that area feel strongly about in order to maintain the district and the quality of the district and what wants to be seen down there, then we wanted to be able to have the opportunity to do that. But we didn't want it to just look like the city was being arbitrary and overruling its own regulations. And so that was part of wanting to include architects and other property owners in the process.
Well, I know when we were living under these same restrictions, it caused us a great deal of heartburn as well. So-
Yes, sir. And we have been subject to PPD contacting us on multiple occasions prior to our purchase of the Skyline Center regarding different issues.
Anybody else? Thank you, Chair. Mr. Manager, is that it?
That is it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for your participation this morning.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we stand adjourned.